Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. In this video, I want to wrap up some books I read in the month of May. So basically, this is part 2 of I think it's gonna be a 3-part wrap up in which I wrap up all of the books that I haven't managed to wrap up in a while, I feel. I also been reading quite a lot in May. I think it's because I read a lot of shorter books. So in part 1, it's my latest video, and then this is part 2 in which I wrap up 4 books I read in the month of May. And then part 3 is also going to be books I read in May, but all of those I read for the Asian Readathon. So I think I'm just gonna bundle them in one video. So let's start with the books, and I'm gonna start with the one I read first, and that was Such a Fun Age by Kiley. Reid. I was really excited to finally read this book because this book was everywhere last year. I've seen it on so many lists and on so many TBRs and so many wrap-ups. So I really was curious to see what the hype is about. And I can really understand why this is so hyped. And for a debut, I think it did pretty well. So basically in this book, we follow 2 women. One is Alex Chamberlain. She is a really wealthy, privileged white woman who has a great career in Manhattan, where she is like a blogger, an Instagrammer, small social media celebrity. She has to move to the suburbs because she and her husband are expecting the second child, and it's just not going to work with them to be in New York with 2 small children, I guess. And when they move there, they get a nanny, and a black nanny, Amira. Amira is 25, she's turning 26 soon, and she really doesn't know what to do with her life. She can barely manage to pay her rent. She's still living as a student even though she graduated a few years ago. And she just feels like she cannot figure out what she wants to do, what her calling is, because she comes from a family where everyone kind of knows what they want to do in life. She's the one sticking out because she really doesn't know what to do. So she gets this nanny job where she takes care of Alex's younger girl, Briar. And she's actually happy with this job. She just does it, and she's happy to be taking care of the child. She really likes Briar because she feels like Briar is so special. The mother doesn't really pay attention to Briar as much as she should. And Amira feels like she's there to step in, I guess. And I think here we go a little bit back to the plantation times where I guess the children of wealthy white people were basically being raised by black women. So I think this goes back to that a little bit and ties in with that. But other than that, in the beginning of this story, we have something happening at Alex's house in the night, and the police comes to take the statement, and Amira is asked to take Briar out of the house so that the child is not there while the police comes. And they go to this local grocery store just to hang out for half an hour until the police are gone. And while they are in that grocery store, the local cop / security guy thinks that Amira actually stole this child, and there's an interaction between them, and then someone catches that on video, and then we go on from there. So basically I thought that this is going to be much more about Amira, about her life, about how she feels with this whole situation, and it is, but I feel like for the most part here we follow Alex and another person who is connected to both Alex and to Amira after this incident. Even though now looking back, I mean, it did go into Amira's life and family and situation and relationships, but I don't know, I just feel like it was a little bit on a surface level. But what this book is really about is how other people react and how other people want to help Amira when this video goes viral, how they feel like they need to step in. And here we talk about a white person like Alex, and also the other person which both are involved with a little bit, and that's also a white person, how they want to help Emira to tackle the situation, even though Emira doesn't really want attention and doesn't really want this video to be public. So this is kind of about white saviorism or performative allyship, and how white people just take over the narrative. I think it shows beautifully this relationship between Alex and Emira, and how in the beginning it's very surface level and very straight to the point. Emira comes, take care of the girl, and Alex goes and does her stuff. But after this incident, it just really shows how Alex suddenly takes so much interest in Emira and really wants to kind of insert herself in her life in a way which I mean, she wasn't interested in it before, and then just suddenly there she was, just wanting to be there and wanting to be her friend almost at all cost. And then we also go back in time into Alex's teenage years, and you can really come to understand her, where she comes from, and maybe why she does certain stuff. So I can only recommend it if you haven't read it. I think for a debut, it is an amazing novel, and yeah, everyone should read it basically. The next one I read was An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. In this one, we follow an older painter in Japan after the Second World War. And here we follow his retirement and the way he's preoccupied with his second daughter's marriage. And at the same time, we go a little bit back in time, and he reminisces on on past events and on his role in the Second World War. I looked into the title a little bit because over the course of this novel, the painter talks about the floating world of the night, the pleasure-seeking aspect of his life. That world which was, I guess, so crucial to his life and life of his friends and other painters and a certain elite of Japan, I would say. Looking at the Japanese world of floating world, this is actually it's ukiyo, which is translated as floating world, but it is also translated as fleeting life and transient world. And I guess it is also reflects the cultural and urban lifestyle of an era in Japan, which it runs from the 1600s until 1850s, 60s, which is the Edo era. Looking into it, you will notice certain types of paintings that were produced from that era, which are really focused on that night life. And that is the life which was set out for this painter, because he was part of this school and his teacher was part of that painting style, painting school, which focused on those paintings. And in the beginning, when we go back in time with him, we follow his career and how it developed, and how he was almost together with other students in this school with his master. They were almost like producing these paintings almost like almost like in a factory way, like you had to produce certain amounts each week and each month to sell it. And how he realized that he wants to be more than an artist of this world, and where that led him in connection with the Second World War, and how knowing what happened in the Second World War in Japan, that was looked upon afterwards, and how Japan was trying to move past those past decisions they took, and how to move forward as collectively as a country and with its people, and how to, I guess, seek redemption in a way. This is really like a pensive book, and one in which memory plays really a great importance, and our narrator is unreliable, because whenever you talk and you write about memory, I guess it's not really black and white. Like, there's a lot of gray areas and you remember things differently compared to someone else who, I guess, participated in the same events, and you place, I guess, importance on different stuff. So this is a lot about how he comes to terms, how the main character comes to terms with what he did and how to move on. I think a lot of people compare this to The Remains of the Day, and especially because the main characters, I think it's like a similar storyline, because both Stevens from The Remains of the Day and our painter here, they look back on their lives and the role they played in certain events, and they have to come to terms with the decisions they made. I felt at times that this was a bit too long and it wasn't going anywhere, but there are a lot of subtleties here that you might miss, I guess, or I could have missed. Or you just need to think about it a little bit after you read it. So overall, I really enjoyed it. The next one I read was 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. And this is a retelling of the Trojan War through the eyes of the women who participated in some ways in it. So this is not just about the Trojan women and their fates and what happened to them after the Trojan War, because we start with the end of the war here and the fall of Troy. We follow also women who are involved in it, like goddesses who caused actually the Trojan War. And we follow also some Greek women who are left at home. And I particularly loved Penelope's chapters, who is the wife of Odysseus, and she is expecting him home after the Trojan War because everyone is returning. But as we know, Odysseus, it took time for him to return home, and she's writing all these letters to him. And I just really love the tone of those letters, a little bit mocking and also understanding and just sarcastic. It was beautiful. And the author, I actually listened to it and the author narrated it, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And even if you don't know a lot about the Greek myths and specifically the Trojan War and its people, I think you will get a great insight into that and an understanding of what happened and who those people were, both the men and the women. But it definitely helped me that I previously read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which also is a book focused on the women of the Trojan War. But that takes place more throughout the war and the siege of Troy, in which we follow the women who are in the camps captured by the Greeks. This is it's not like a novel in a sense that you follow a plot line from the beginning to the end. It has a common thread to it, but we move back and forth between different characters, different women, and what happened to them specifically in the context of the Trojan War or afterwards. And I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was beautifully written, and I loved every single of these characters and how real these women felt. I think that this is a book, like on the cover it says as well, if you love Circe by Madeline Miller, you will absolutely love this one, and I agree. And now I definitely want to read more by this author, but also I think I want to read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. In the Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, a lot of that story was also about Achilles and Patroclus, and that is also the main focus of A Song of Achilles. So I can't wait to get to that as well, and I can only recommend this. And the last one I want to talk about is The Death of Vivek by Akwaeke Emezi. I have previously tried and failed to read Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi, but I'm happy that I gave this one a go, because this was I think much more readable and much more easier to understand than Freshwater. And I think that's partly because Freshwater was so much steeped into, I guess, magical realism in a way. It was too imbued with magical realism, yes. This has like touches of magical realism, but other than that, I think it's one that would appeal to more people. I'm not a particular fan of magical realism, but after reading this, I really have to go back to Freshwater and just read it with different eyes, because this was such a beautiful, emotional, heartbreaking story that, oh, I think just everyone should read. And I really understand why this is so hyped, and it deserves absolutely all the hype it can get. So basically, as the title says, we are reading about the death of Vivek Oji. It starts with his mother finding his body at her doorstep, and we go from there. So basically, we follow Vivek Oji through his life from when he was a baby, before even that, with his parents, and where they came from and how they came together, and their family, the extended family. And then we follow Vivek Oji when he was a child, and all the way up to, yeah, he's I guess into his 20s, early 20s, I think, when he died. And this novel is set in Nigeria, and also in a tumultuous time of Nigerian history, while the country was under dictatorship. So we have that as well in the background, where people, I guess, are rioting and just a lot of unrest happening around these characters. Throughout the story, we meet different people. We meet the Niger wives, so women from all over the world who are married with Nigerian men, and we follow them. And Vivek's mother is also part of this group. So we meet a lot of different people, and Vivek's family and close friends. And throughout that, we really get a sense of the gender roles within this time, of how much focus it is on being a masculine man, and what is the place of women in this society, how it is to be an other in this context, and how different people relate to you when you are different. So we don't really read from Vivek Oji's perspective. We read from the perspective of the people around him. And I think that's what really makes this book great, or at least it did for me, because you don't read from his perspective. He's not trying to tell you who he is and how you should see him and how you should understand him. It is all the other people and how they relate to him, how they see him, and how they, I guess, try to come to terms with who he is, and try to come to terms with, I guess, to understand him and accept him. And because there's so much about not understanding Vivek Oji in this one, and I think it was just beautiful. And it was heartbreaking the way the mother really tried to figure out who her son is, because as the premise says on Goodreads here, what does it mean for a family to lose a child they never really knew? Because no one really knew who, I guess, Vivek Oji is. And I don't want to say more about this because I really didn't know what this story was actually about until I read it, and I think that's the best way to go into it. These are all the 4 books I wanted to talk about this time. And keep an eye for the next video, which is going to be about the books I read for the Asian Readathon. But let me know if you have read any of these books. I think they're pretty popular, all of them. I think also quite recent, most of them, apart from An Artist of the Floating World. So I guess you have probably heard of all of these. But this is where I will leave you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.